Hi everybody, I'm Klee here with Jack, and in this video, we will be discussing managing group dynamics on Zoom. We'll be talking about this concept in two parts. One, building the sandbox, and two, addressing conflict. Jack, will you start by telling us what the idea building the sandbox is and what this looks like on Zoom?
Yeah. So you know how when you're working with kids at camp, you're usually setting some form of expectation when you get to the archery range, when you get to the pool, when you get to the lake, when you get to arts and crafts, you set those expectations. Well, we call that building the sandbox. And it's even more important on Zoom because it's weird and it's different. Most kids have interacted with Zoom or other virtual programming in some way through school and things like that. But what you're going to be doing this summer is different. It's special and it's all about building relationships. And so we have to set that tone early when we build the sandbox for what's appropriate in that space. Klee, when you arrive, you start with, "Hi, my name's Klee. Here's what we're going to be up to today." And you go through the plan of the day, right? So you go through, "Hi, we're going to do introductions. Then we're going to get into baking our cookies. And finally, we're going to end with a little debrief question at the end." Okay, let's get started with the introductions. "My name, blah, blah, blah." And you get into that's what's happening, right? So you start with what's going to happen, and then you move into what are the kind of rules or agreements in this space. And it's really important to make sure you say this so that kids know what they're doing. And you're gonna be able to get ahead of so many problems by starting from this point and not assuming that kids know what to do when they get on Zoom, because it's different than the rest of the world. When can you talk? Is it okay? Do you need to raise your hand? All those kind of things. You're going to have different expectations for different activities and for different camps. But Klee, will you kind of do the introduction for our agreements and what we expect from kids in most spaces at camp?
Great. At camp, we make 3 agreements to be in community together. Number 1, take care of ourselves and others. Number 2, don't jeopardize the future of camp. And number 3, agree to talk about conflict when it arises. Here's what's most important about those on Zoom. Firstly, we make it clear that campers should use the chat to lift each other up and not bring each other down. So this means no name calling in the chat, no using curse words that may make other kids uncomfortable, and not putting each other down by saying you suck. Things like that. And we give them direct examples so they know exactly what we're asking. Number 2, we let campers know about the my house, my rules rule. What this means is the staff member in charge of the Zoom call is ultimately going to call the shots and make decisions about how the Zoom call runs. It's important for kids to know who's in charge of the Zoom call so they know who to ask when they need help, or let the staff member know if they're annoyed, frustrated, or confused about anything. And lastly, we let campers know that they are free to leave. With that, we ask that they don't bring activities down or comment negatively about activities in the chat or to each other. Instead, we let campers know if they're not having that much fun or they're bored, they are free to sign off whenever they'd like.
So those are the 3 kind of tangible things that we talk about at the beginning of almost every call. Use the chat only for positivity and on-topic conversations. 2, that this is my space, and I'm not going to be rude and try and put anybody down as the person running it, but it is my job to keep everyone safe and understanding what's going to happen. So that might mean that I mute people or ask people to slow down or change what's happening, because in the end, I'm the one that has to make sure that I'm taking care of all the kids on the call. And finally, we let kids know that it's okay for them to not continue with the activity and just leave if it's not something that they're interested in. You're going to have a couple of different rules, a couple of different expectations based on your camp and based on the activity. So we have slightly different rules if we're leading an arts and crafts activity than if we're leading a cooking option or those kind of things. You want to make sure at the beginning of the session you outline what those things are. What I like to do is write down the 3 big ones that we go through and then add a couple more for each different type of session that I'm leading with kids. Then I can look down at it, remember that I've gone through each one, and then make sure that I've explained it to each person in the conversation, while the co-facilitator can type those into the chat after each bullet point that I go through.
Okay, up next, we're going to talk about how to address conflict on Zoom as a very important group management technique.
Conflict on Zoom is weird. Let's be honest. You have a lot of techniques that you've done before, and many of them will translate to Zoom, but some of them don't. So, like, for example, let's say you're leading a circle game and you've noticed that one of your campers is not really paying attention, they're talking over, those kind of things. Something you might do is move your location to stand next to them to help that proximity and give them a chance to kind of be closer to you and let you kind of work with them. That's not a thing you can do on Zoom. I can't move my boxes around. I can't jump into blah, blah, blah. I can't do that. So we've got to have a few different techniques. The really big one, the proactive way to kind of mitigating conflict is just like we talked about in the other video. It's about being assertive. It's about keeping things moving. And it's a little bit uncomfortable because my guess is you haven't led a ton of stuff online like this before because not really many people have. And so it's our job to take that responsibility and be the lead on that. So even though I'm unsure sometimes and I haven't done this kind of stuff before, I've got to step up and just be assertive and say, this is what's going to happen and this is what we're going to do. If I notice that there's some chat going on and I'm not sure if I should step in, I should. If I'm seeing things that seem a little bit weird or two kids are bumping heads in a way that, like, maybe if we were at the Gaga pit at camp, I might kind of let it go because I'm used to it and sometimes it like kind of moves past. That doesn't work on Zoom. We've got to step in and say, whoa, can we pause for a second? I'm going to mute everyone. Muting everyone is a great technique. As the host, you can do that. Mute everyone and then say, all right, Klee, Ray, it seems like there's some kind of tension going on here, and I'd love to either talk about it or have it stop. You can decide. But the key is you can't just let it go because once it starts rolling, it's really hard to get back on track. And as the person whose house it is, who's running the activity, it's our job to make sure that we're stepping in those situations. Couple things to do on the back end. Make sure you talk to your director about keeping the chat so that it just can go from participants to the host. Second thing, making sure, like we talked about earlier, that we set the tone that the chat is going to be for positivity and we're not going to have spamming in the chat and those kind of things. And three, becoming really comfortable with being able to mute people and letting kids know what is going to happen before it happens. Now, we just talked about Ray and Klee having a conversation in front of everybody about like a tense point. That's a little bit weird. It's strange, but it's the only real option we have in these spaces. And so we make sure to let kids know ahead of time that that's what might happen if conflict comes up. We're going to talk about it. And if they're not ready to talk about it right then, that's okay. Talk to your director, let them know what happened, and ask if it's appropriate for your director and you to set up a call with each of those kids or maybe get their parents involved. In this situation, and in many situations, just like at camp, sometimes bringing the parents involved into the conversation is the best thing we can do. And they're already there. It's a little bit weird because on Zoom, often a parent might be just off screen. They might be sitting next to the kid. So you might be leading these conversations and having some conflict resolution happening with grown-ups in the room. That can be weird, but here's the secret. You're actually awesome at this. And almost always, in our experience, the parents are blown away when young people like you step in and are responsible and positive. They love that. That same role model attitude that the kids get from you at camp, they're going to be able to see over Zoom. They're going to be able to see over the internet that parents normally don't get to see. Normally we get the kids for a week or the summer and they come back and it's awesome and the kids tell amazing stories about what happened, but the parents never get to see you being such an awesome, responsible, fun, silly, and engaging facilitator. This is a cool opportunity for these parents to see what camp can really be like in this weird, strange, sci-fi way. Klee, tell me a little bit about outlining agreements and why that matters.
Addressing conflict can be tricky, and what really helps is falling back on those agreements that we talked about and outlining exactly, reiterating exactly what you mean by those agreements so that when conflict shows up, you have a reference point, and returning to those helps you to be more proactive than reactive.
Klee, I love that. So what you're saying is if we build a great sandbox, if we set great expectations at the beginning, it often makes less conflict happen. And when conflict does occur, it makes it easier to move forward.
That's
So
right.
sometimes it might be tempting to kind of rush through some of those expectations, but it's worth it to reiterate those every time we jump on these calls. So here's the thing. Managing conflict and group dynamics on Zoom is weird. It's strange. You're going to mess up. I mess up all the time. The goal that we need to keep in mind is making sure kids are safe, taken care of, and that we're doing our best to help them build a community online. And that it's okay if a couple times you're not sure and you make a mistake and you've got to say, pause, let's rewind for a second, and I want to get back to those expectations. I've got to rebuild this sandbox. That's okay. Kids are going to be forgiving because they're going to love getting to spend time with you in a way that they normally wouldn't. You're amazing. This summer is going to be incredible. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be like nothing that you've ever done before. And that's exciting. It's going to be the kind of thing that you and these kids tell your grandkids about, and it's going to be awesome. You're going to rock.